Have you ever felt like something is profoundly wrong with the world, yet no one around you seems to notice? As if you're perceiving hidden layers of reality, while everyone else drifts through life anesthetized, entertained, resigned. Maybe you've tried to share a deeper thought in a casual conversation, only to be met with awkward silences, blank stares, or subtle mockery disguised as humor. The more you think, the more you see, and the more you see, the more disconnected you become. This isn't random. It's a pattern, a cruel and invisible pattern that society imposes on those who dare to look deeper. You are not arrogant for feeling others seem shallow. You are not snobbish for choosing silence over small talk. You are not broken. You are awake, and the world fears those who awaken. Arthur Schopenhauer, one of history's most ruthlessly honest philosophers, understood this better than most. He wrote, "A high degree of intellect tends to make a man unsociable, not because the intellectual withdraws, but because the world pushes him away. True intelligence, the kind that doesn't just repeat facts but questions meaning, confronts illusions, and faces the pain of existence with honesty, is not celebrated. It's seen as a threat. Why? Because it disturbs what people are desperate to protect their illusions. We live in a world where it's acceptable to flaunt wealth, beauty, even power, but not wisdom. Wisdom unsettles. It strips illusions bare. It shines a light where others would rather keep things hidden. Most would rather stay blind than face the truths you can no longer ignore. So if you're watching this because you feel out of place, misunderstood, maybe even unwanted, know this. It's not your fault. This is the price you pay for seeing too much. But in that vision there is power. In that solitude there is greatness. And in that discomfort there is a path. Not a path to fit into a world that was never designed for you, but a path to live within it, with wisdom, without losing who you are. This video is not a message for the masses. It's a conversation with you, with those who are tired of being told they're too intense and too serious or too much, with those who've learned that thinking, really thinking, is sometimes an act of solitude, but always an act of courage. And that is exactly what we're going to talk about. If this resonates with you, keep watching, because finally, someone is going to say what you've always felt, but no one's had the courage to admit. That discomfort you feel when trying to be yourself in social settings? It's not in your head. There's a deeply rooted psychological mechanism that explains why intelligent people, especially those who think critically, analytically, and existentially, often trigger negative reactions without doing anything. Outwardly offensive. It's called the mirror effect. Here's how it works. When you enter a space and speak with depth, when you question blindly accepted ideas, or simply show clarity in how you think, something gets activated in the other. Person. A kind of internal short circuit. Without saying it outright, you make them see themselves, and that reflection is almost always uncomfortable. Why? Because many people have built their identity on fragile foundations. Borrowed beliefs, second-hand, values, inherited narratives. Not on a genuine search for truth, you become a mirror. And no one enjoys looking into a mirror when what's reflected back is insecurity, ignorance, or emotional emptiness. Your thoughts are not just thoughts. They're silent invitations to introspection. And introspection hurts. You become a symbolic threat, a reminder of everything the other person has avoided thinking, feeling, or confronting, and their natural response. Rejection. The problem isn't you. It's what your presence awakens. Schopenhauer once said that elevated intellect often becomes lonely, not because it withdraws, but because society rejects what it cannot understand. And he was right. When someone pushes you away for being too deep, they're usually trying to protect their own self-image. It's not rational. It's instinctive, an ego defense mechanism. That's why when you talk about existential questions, challenge social norms, or reflect on the human condition, it feels like you're trespassing on sacred ground. You're threatening a mental structure built to keep them safe within their illusion. They don't want to wake up. They want to keep sleeping. And you are the alarm clock. But don't think this is new. Throughout history, great thinkers have been ridiculed, ostracized, even silenced. Not because they were wrong, but because they dared to be the mirror in a room full of masks. So the real question is, why does society cling so tightly to these masks, even when the truth is right in front of them? Why is deep thinking so threatening? The answer lies in the next part, where we'll explore why society chooses comfort over truth and why intelligent, awake individuals are so often pushed to the margins. Get ready, because now we're going to touch the wound. If this content speaks to you, if it reflects something you've always felt but never heard out loud, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for being here. The truth for most people is unbearable, but for some, like you, it's the beginning of everything. It hurts, it destabilizes, it uproots everything we call normal. And that's exactly why society, as a living, self-protective organism, has developed a powerful survival mechanism. It prioritizes comfort over truth. Anything that threatens that comfort is swiftly rejected. Deep intelligence isn't just about accumulating knowledge. It's the ability to see hidden patterns, to question the obvious, to distrust what passes as common sense. And that right there is the problem. Because common sense is what keeps the machinery of society running. It maintains the routine, it upholds roles, and when truth breaks through, when someone sees beyond the illusion, it disrupts all of that. That's why the deep thinker isn't seen as wise. They're seen as a threat. Schopenhauer understood this with brutal clarity. He believed that most people live in a state of voluntary illusion, driven by what he called blind will. They don't want to understand the world. They just want to survive it, with as little discomfort as possible. So the pursuit of truth becomes an antisocial act. It requires rupture, bravery, and, perhaps worst of all, a willingness to lose what once felt certain. And no one wants to lose their certainty, even if it's built on lies. That's why society rewards the obedient. Those who don't ask questions. The student who repeats formulas without reflection gets good grades. The employee who follows orders without question gets promoted. The citizen who believes what everyone else believes is labeled good. But the one who thinks for themselves, they're called arrogant, problematic, subversive. This is why you feel out of place. You are the exception that threatens the rule. It's no accident that the most popular content online is fast, shallow, and sensational. Intelligence frightens people because it demands a pause. And in a world addicted to distraction, pausing to think is an act of rebellion. While the masses chase instant gratification, the thinker walks slowly toward discomfort, and that makes them dangerous. The system, the culture, even the institutions that claim to educate us, they're all designed to keep you distracted, not awake. From childhood, we're trained to fit in, not to ask why, but when someone breaks free of that conditioning, when they start to see the gears behind the curtain, society treats them like a virus, something to isolate, something to silence. But what if this virus, this capacity for deep thought, isn't the disease? What if it's the cure? The cure for the existential emptiness so many feel but can't explain. So why does society still treat the thinker as an enemy? The answer lies in a deeper wound, the historical loneliness of those who dared to see too much. In the next part, we'll explore why the most brilliant minds in history were rejected in life, and why that same pattern might be unfolding in your life too. The loneliness you feel is not a mistake. It's part of the path, a recurring pattern that shadows those who refuse to accept the world at face value. History is relentless on this point. Time and again, those who dared to think too deeply, see too clearly, speak too honestly, were cast out. And we're not talking about forgotten names. We're talking about the greatest minds humanity has ever known. Socrates was sentenced to death for teaching people to think. The official charge? Corrupting the youth with questions. The truth? He was awakening dormant minds. Galileo was forced to deny his discoveries under threat of execution by the church. Nikola Tesla died alone in a hotel room while the world praised the men who stole his ideas. Schopenhauer, one of the sharpest and most unflinching thinkers of the 19th century, lived much of his life in obscurity, recognized only after his death. The pattern is undeniable. The deeper the thought, the more violent the rejection. Why does this happen? Because the thinker is an anomaly. They don't conform. They don't repeat what they're told. They observe from the outside, question the unquestioned, and, worst of all, illuminate contradictions no one wants to face. And that creates discomfort. It provokes resentment. It awakens fear. And society rarely forgives those who force it to look in the mirror. This rejection doesn't always come from governments or institutions. It shows up in the small, subtle moments of everyday life, in the conversation where you realize it's safer to stay silent than risk being labeled too intense, in the persistent sense of not belonging, in the frustration of being unable to connect with people anesthetized by shallow distractions. You speak of silence, they talk about reality shows. You question existence, they ask if you've seen the latest viral meme. And over time you begin to quiet not because you lack a voice, but because you've stopped expecting anyone to hear it. Society doesn't know what to do with those who see too much, and so it casts the thinker as a lone wolf. But there's a difference between solitude and forced isolation. The former is a choice, the latter a punishment. And that's what many thinkers endure. Punishment for not fitting the mold. But don't be fooled, this loneliness is not the end. In fact, it may be the beginning of a new way of living, one that is more authentic, more conscious, and more free. To understand why this loneliness is not only inevitable but necessary, we must look inside the human brain, because the rejection of deep thought is not just cultural, it's biological. You could be the kindest, most humble person in the world. You could speak gently, smile often, and never act superior. But if you are truly intelligent, you'll eventually notice something unsettling. Your mere presence makes people uncomfortable, even when silent, even when discreet. You generate tension. And it's not just social, it's neurological. The human mind is tribal. We evolved in small groups where survival depended on acceptance. Rejection by the group often meant death. Our brains still carry that ancient code. A deep, primal fear of anything that threatens group cohesion, and a mind that sees too much, that questions the tribe's illusions, that doesn't laugh at the same jokes or parrot the same opinions. That mind is perceived as a threat. It's not what you say, it's what you see. Your vision disturbs the fragile balance. You unknowingly challenge the invisible rules of belonging. And the other person's brain interprets this as danger. Neuroscience backs this up. Studies show that when someone feels intellectually threatened, their brain activates the amygdala, the center of fear and aggression. Your intelligence is often processed not as insight, but as a predator. Not because you'll hurt someone, but because you represent the unknown, the unpredictable, the off-script. And in human history, the different has always been exiled. Modern society only reinforces this tribal instinct. Schools standardize thought. Workplaces reward conformity. Social media punishes nuance. In the next part, we'll go even deeper into how intelligence becomes rebellion and why the very act of thinking is often an act of resistance. Social. Media has become a digital playground of distraction. It creates bubbles, echo chambers where comfort is rewarded and complexity is filtered out. The algorithm does not want you to think, it wants you to click. Your restless mind, your unyielding thirst for meaning, becomes a glitch in this system. You are not satisfied with shallow answers. You cannot pretend the surface is enough. And that's a problem in a world that thrives on appearances, not depth. The result? You're labeled as complicated, intense, maybe even strange. But here's the truth. You are a mirror, a reminder, a disruption. Most people are not living. They're surviving. They're not thinking, they're repeating. They are not awake, they're anesthetized. You shine a light on what they've worked hard to ignore. But what do you do with this burden? How do you exist in a society that seems to have no space for minds like yours? How do you preserve your lucidity without letting the weight of rejection crush you? This is the heart of what we need to explore. If you've ever felt like your intelligence isolates you, if your insights feel like both a gift and a curse, you'll find real value in my ebook, Beyond the Shadow. It explores Jung's most powerful ideas and offers practical guidance for navigating the loneliness of seeing what others can't. The link is in the pinned comment. Now, If you've made it this far, it's because you recognize the weight of carrying a mind that doesn't quite fit in. And no, you don't need to fit in, but you do need to survive. And beyond that, you deserve to thrive, even in a world seemingly built to silence voices like yours. The question is not how to change who you are. It's how to transform your clarity into strength, your sensitivity into wisdom, your solitude into sanctuary. Arthur Schopenhauer, with all his philosophical severity, did not believe the world was a fair place for the intelligent. In his view, the elevated mind would inevitably walk alone, not in bitter exile, but in chosen solitude. He urged thinkers not to see isolation as punishment, but as refuge. It is in silence, in introspection, and in withdrawal from the masses that clarity emerges. Solitude is the fate of all exceptional spirits, he said. If you feel misunderstood, if conversation exhausts you, if social situations drain your energy, perhaps it's time to stop forcing yourself to belong. Stop trying to plant seeds in barren soil. Start choosing people, spaces, and conversations that honor depth. Trade quantity for quality. One sincere dialogue is worth more than 1,000 shallow exchanges. This doesn't mean you must live isolated from the world. It means learning to live within it without losing yourself. It means learning to modulate your language. Not every space deserves your full depth. Not every listener is ready to receive your truth. This is not censorship. It is discernment. As Schopenhauer advised, never share the depth of your thoughts with those who live on the surface. Use your intelligence like a mirror, one that only reflects for those with the courage to look. Another vital strategy is to create outlets for your inner world. Journal, write, paint, film, speak, build, express. Do not let your mind implode. From unexpressed thought, channel it into something that builds. Transform your discomfort into language, your insight into art. Create meaning in a world addicted to noise. And most importantly, find your people. Even if they are few, even if they are far. The internet, for all its flaws, has allowed scattered souls to connect. Online reading groups, philosophical forums, deep message exchanges. These are sanctuaries for minds like yours. Your tribe exists. You just need to stop seeking approval from the wrong crowds. Still, even with all this, one truth remains. Being a deep thinker in a shallow world is a constant challenge, and the further you go in your awareness, the lonelier the path might feel, but hidden in this loneliness is a gift, the quiet gift of perception, the power to see what others cannot. And if you can accept this, if you can hold it without bitterness, it becomes your superpower. There is a cost to seeing too much, to thinking too deeply, to feeling too fully. That cost is awareness. And awareness, contrary to what self-help cliches might promise, does not bring immediate peace. It brings truth, and truth almost always is uncomfortable. You've probably tried to fit in, tried to be quieter, tried to mold yourself. You've tried to seem less intense, less analytical, less you. But every time you did, a part of you died inside. Because there is no freedom in hiding, only exhaustion. And here's the twist. The same world that rejects you for being different will never reward you for pretending to be the same. What makes you excluded is what makes you essential. The world needs minds that see what others miss. It needs voices that challenge comfort, that disrupt illusions, that point out contradictions. You are one of those voices, and your task is not to adapt, but to position yourself, to use your insight as a tool, not carry it as a burden, to turn your solitude into clarity, your pain into beauty, your restlessness into direction. You were not born to please. You were born to awaken. Yes, this means you might walk alone sometimes. You might be misunderstood. You might be excluded from certain rooms. But don't confuse rejection with failure. The crowd isn't rejecting you, they're rejecting what they are not yet ready to face. And all things new, true, and transformative are mocked before they are honored. Socrates was sentenced to death for asking questions. His crime? Corrupting the youth with curiosity. In reality, he was simply awakening sleeping minds. Galileo was forced to deny his discoveries to avoid execution. His telescope threatened an illusion too comforting to let go. Nikola Tesla died alone in a hotel room, while the world celebrated the men who stole his ideas. And Schopenhauer, perhaps one of the sharpest minds of the 19th century, lived in obscurity and disdain, only to be recognized decades after his death. The pattern is clear. The deeper the thought, the more violent the resistance. Why? Because the thinker is an anomaly. They don't fit, they don't obey, they don't repeat. They observe, question, and, worst of all, they reveal. They shine. Light on illusions others would rather keep. This rejection doesn't only come from institutions. It seeps into everyday interactions. It's in the conversation where you sense you must go silent to avoid being too much. It's in the fatigue of trying to connect with people who are satisfied with trivia and spectacle. It's in the pain of being unheard, not for lack of words, but for lack of ears. Society doesn't know what to do with those who see too much, so it turns the thinker into a lone wolf. But there's a difference between chosen solitude and imposed isolation. One is liberation, the other is exile. Most thinkers experience the latter, punished not for doing wrong, but for not conforming. Yet even in this punishment, there is power. There is a sacred path available to you, the path of becoming. Not bending, not hiding, but transforming. Use your clarity as a compass, use your inner tension as raw material. And always, always remember, your difference is your gift. The masses chase comfort, you pursue truth. That is not a flaw, it is your purpose. So don't numb your brilliance, don't dilute your vision, don't let your light flicker just because it makes others squint. You were never meant to be average, you were never meant to fit. You were meant to wake people up, and yes, it's a lonely role. But it's also a sacred one. So if you felt that strange ache, that sense of exile, that yearning for more, that quiet clarity that no one seems to understand, write in the comments, I see. Because that's the difference between the awakened and the asleep. And if you see you're not alone, others are here too. Quiet minds, restless hearts, seers of truth. And if you're ready to continue this journey, to understand even more about yourself, the psyche, and the invisible architecture of reality, watch the next video. It's essential. You'll understand why.